Do you remember the good old days when Yu-Gi-Oh games were a hard-fought back-and-forth battle of resource management, when you attacked your opponent for 2,000 and not 10,000, when games were started with a single set monster and a set trap, when you had to ask your opponent cards in hand every turn? The days when I actually had hair? I think you get the point. Well, I remember those days, and I don't think we're getting that era back, but one deck is still bravely representing the players who wish they could. That deck is Sky Strikers. Sky Striker is the only competitive deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now that I would consider to be classic control. Some could debate my categorization, and others could debate whether Sky Strikers are even competitive. But I think they are, and so did Ryan Yu. His second place finish at YCS Niagara Falls was not shocking, as he is considered one of the best players in the world, but what was shocking was the fact that he achieved that feat with Sky Strikers in the year 2024. Bringing Sky Strikers to a competitive tournament like a YCS is comparable to bringing a sword to a gunfight. It is perhaps a more elegant weapon from a more civilized age, but it is also quite underpowered. Allow me to elaborate. In the classic era of Yu-Gi-Oh!, card advantage really was king. The game was all about playing cards that had effects that drew you cards, or dealt with your opponent's threats, or just monsters that had really solid stats. Games quite often came down to a top deck battle on turn 10 or later, and when there were decks that could OTK consistently, they were just banned. Take Cyberstein, for example, the first deck to win a Shonen Jump Finals on turn 1. It's unsurprising that shortly afterwards, Cyberstein became the first card to be emergency banned in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG history. But slowly, things started to change. It's hard to say when the exact turning point was. Some might say 2008 with Dark Arm Dragon, Gladiator Beast, and Lightsworn. Others could point to the 2012 meta of Rescue Rabbit, Windups, and Sectors, and Chaos Dragons as when things got really bad. Or maybe for you it was Dragon Rulers that took things too far, or Zodiacs, or Pendulum Spam. Regardless though, one thing is now certain. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not what it used to be. Decks are not composed of piles of good cards that are purely geared towards generating card advantage. They're composed of broken synergies spoon-fed to us by the game designers to give us decks that can end games before they really even start. Flash forward all the way to 2025, and 2-card and 1-card OTKs aren't some sort of accidental design mishap that needs to be emergency banned. Now, those combos aren't even just part of the meta, they are the meta. Your deck needs to have killing potential on your first or second turn, or you're just asking to get crushed. Or does it? Well, that's where Sky Strikers come in. Sky Strikers first came onto the scene in 2018, and something really interesting happened on their release. I noticed that a lot of the old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that I knew who had sort of fallen out of love with Yu-Gi-Oh! Many years ago suddenly became interested again. And that's because Sky Strikers were the first modern archetype that was designed to be a classic control deck. The old fundamentals of card advantage and resource management seem to matter again. This was especially true in Sky Striker mirrors, which were quite common when the archetype first became competitive. This was a matchup where both players had access to tons of different options, and no one was going to establish an overwhelming board position on the first turn. The skillful control mirror where small decisions mattered was back to a game that had been sorely missing that kind of gameplay for 10 years. Since their release back in 2018, Sky Strikers have always been at least somewhat viable, but a lot has changed since then. The meta seems to get more broken with each passing year, but also Sky Strikers have picked up some new tools along the way. In particular, Sky Striker linkage has allowed them to kill much faster than they could in 2018, but the deck is still fundamentally a good old control deck. And I've actually been winning quite a lot lately with Sky Strikers. My philosophy has basically been to just go blind second, let my opponent make whatever board they want, and then absolutely murder that board on my next turn with cards like Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched, both of which are searchable by Triple Tactics talent. It's kind of refreshing to take a break from fighting the hand trap wars of trying to assemble the nuts before my opponent does. Being a control deck is a bit of a less stressful game plan. It's just activate Engage, go +1. Activate Afterburner, go +1. Activate Harpy's Feather Duster, go +1. You're not going to win every single game that way, but I think you'd be surprised to see how many decks are just unprepared to play against a bunch of +1s and board wipes. This might sound crazy, but I actually think Sky Striker is a viable deck right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. In particular, I've been playing against Yubel a lot on ladder lately, and Sky Strikers just absolutely destroy Yubel. And you know what else is crazy, actually? The fact that my videos are getting thousands of views, but I still have less than 100 subscribers. Not clicking the subscribe button is a huge misplay, my guys. Yes, Sky Strikers, they've got their problem matchups just like every other deck does. And in Master Duel, that problem matchup is Tenpai Dragons because, as it turns out, a bunch of board wipes aren't great against a deck that kills you on their first battle phase. But Tenpai Dragons aren't quite as popular as they used to be. The good news is also that Secret Village of the Spellcasters is getting banned and Anti-Spell Fragrance is getting restricted. That is undoubtedly a notable win for Sky Striker enjoyers. Other than Tenpai Dragons, I think you've got a pretty solid game plan against all of the popular decks in Master Duel. So if the reactive and card advantage driven playstyle of Sky Strikers is something that speaks to you, then I think you should give the deck a shot. And I will give Konami credit where it's due. Yes, the meta is in many ways very overpowered. There are certain decks like Tenpai Dragons and even Gimmick Puppets that seem to operate in a very unfair way. In spite of that though, there does seem to be a ton of viable decks that are all pretty different from each other. I like the fact that if you play well, you could get to master rank with like 20 different decks. And this season, I'm gonna show you that I can do it with Sky Strikers. If you wanna see the list of the other decks that I think are viable right now, then you should check out my tier list video over here. I will be making lots more content, not just about decks like Sky Strikers and Gimmick Puppets, but of many, many other decks as well. So thanks for watching.